Have you ever wondered what would happen if you were trapped on a haunted plane? Well, let me tell you, because I lived through it. The night was unusually still when I boarded the late-night flight from New York to Los Angeles. The airport was almost deserted, a stark contrast to its usual bustling state. The flickering overhead lights cast long, eerie shadows that danced across the terminal floor. As I walked down the jet bridge, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I brushed it aside, attributing it to fatigue from a long day. Once on board, I settled into my window seat, glancing around at the other passengers. A mother and her young daughter sat across the aisle, an elderly couple behind me, and a businessman typing furiously on his laptop a few rows ahead. We were a small group, and the plane felt oddly empty. The flight attendants moved efficiently, but there was a nervous energy about them that I couldn't ignore. Little did I know, I was about to experience the most terrifying night of my life. As the plane took off, everything seemed normal. The hum of the engines, the dimmed cabin lights, and the occasional chime of the seatbelt sign. I leaned back, trying to relax, but a strange unease gnawed at me. It started with a faint whisper, almost like someone calling my name. I turned to look, but everyone was either engrossed in their own activities or fast asleep. The lights flickered, just for a moment. I shrugged it off as turbulence, but then, I heard it again, the whispering, this time clearer and more insistent. It was as if someone was trying to get my attention, but I couldn't see anyone. The whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony of voices. I wasn't the only one. Other passengers started looking around, puzzled and uneasy. The mother across the aisle clutched her daughter tightly, whispering soothing words that sounded more like a mantra. The elderly couple behind me exchanged worried glances, and the businessman's fingers froze on his keyboard as he stared blankly at the screen. Suddenly, the plane was enveloped in darkness. The emergency lights flickered on, casting an ominous red glow over everything. The whispers turned into cries, desperate and mournful. The lights flickered more frequently, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air grew colder, and I felt a presence, like someone was sitting right next to me, watching. Panic set in among the passengers. Some pressed the call button for the flight attendants, but no one came. The plane jolted, and overhead bins flew open, spilling luggage into the aisles. Passengers screamed, and the air was thick with fear. I tried to calm myself, but it was impossible. Something was terribly wrong. The mother across the aisle began to cry, her daughter clutching her arm, wide-eyed and terrified. The elderly couple behind me were whispering prayers, their faces pale and drawn. The businessman was frantically typing, trying to send a message, but his laptop screen flickered and died. A shadow moved at the front of the cabin. It was tall and indistinct, more of a dark blur than a solid figure. It seemed to glide rather than walk, moving slowly down the aisle. As it passed each row, the whispers grew louder, the temperature dropped, and the lights flickered violently. It was coming closer. Passengers were frozen in fear, unable to move or speak. The shadow stopped beside me, and I felt an icy breath on my neck. It whispered something unintelligible, and I felt a cold hand brush against my arm. I jumped, but there was nothing there. The shadow moved on, disappearing into the darkness at the back of the plane. The cries grew louder, and ghostly apparitions began to appear, their faces twisted in anguish. They floated through the cabin, reaching out with transparent hands. Some passengers tried to run, but the apparitions blocked their path, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The plane shook violently, and I heard the sound of metal tearing. The ceiling above us began to buckle, and I saw cracks forming along the walls. The lights flickered one last time before going out completely, plunging us into darkness. The only light came from the emergency exit signs, casting an eerie glow over the terrified faces of the passengers. I overheard a flight attendant whispering to another, "This can't be happening again, not after what happened to Flight 107. Curiosity overcame my fear. I approached her, demanding to know what she meant. She hesitated, then told me the story. Years ago, on a night just like this, a flight disappeared mid-air. They never found the plane or the passengers. Rumor had it that the plane was cursed, haunted by the spirits of those lost souls. The flight attendant explained that Flight 107 had experienced the same strange phenomena. The flickering lights, the whispers, the shadowy figure. They had tried everything to save the passengers, but nothing worked. The plane vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a few pieces of debris and unanswered questions. As she spoke, the whispers grew louder, and I saw the shadowy figure reappear at the front of the cabin. It was watching us, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. I realized that we were reliving the same nightmare that had claimed Flight 107. Suddenly, the plane shook violently. Ghostly apparitions appeared, floating through the cabin. Passengers screamed and huddled together, praying for it to stop. I saw the ghost of a pilot, eyes hollow and despairing, standing in the cockpit doorway. We had to act. A group of us, led by an ex-military passenger, decided to confront whatever was haunting the plane. We made our way to the cockpit, pushing through the fear and the ghosts that tried to stop us. The shadows closed in around us, their whispers turning into menacing growls. As we reached the cockpit, the ghost pilot turned to us. "You must finish what we started," he whispered, pointing to a logbook on the control panel. The plane shook again, more violently this time, and we were thrown to the floor. The logbook glowed with an eerie light, its pages flipping on their own. The ex-military passenger grabbed the logbook and began reading the entries aloud. They were the final words of the doomed Flight 107, detailing their last moments and the curse that bound them to the plane. As he read, the ghosts grew more agitated, their forms becoming more solid and terrifying. The plane began to descend rapidly, the altimeter spinning wildly. We were running out of time. The ex-military passenger shouted for us to hold on as he read the final entry. The lights flickered, and the apparition screamed in rage. The plane landed safely, and as we disembarked, I looked back. The ghostly figures stood at the window, watching us with sad smiles. We had freed them, but the memory of that night would haunt me forever. And then, just as I thought it was over, I received a message on my phone. "Thank you for helping us, but remember, the curse never truly ends." I froze, staring at the screen. The message was from the ghost pilot. My phone buzzed again, and a new message appeared. "We're coming for you next." I dropped my phone, my heart pounding in my chest. The airport around me seemed to blur, the familiar faces of the passengers morphing into the hollow-eyed ghosts of Flight 107. The curse had passed to us. We were the next Flight 107, and our nightmare was only beginning. As I walked through the terminal, I could see the shadows following me, their whispers growing louder with each step. The curse was real, and it would never let us go. The horror of that night would haunt us forever, and we could never escape the fate that awaited us on the next haunted flight. If you love horror stories, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.